It was a great act of mercy in my life. It was the greatest moment of gratitude that I had had to that point when I was 23 years old. Where was I? I was in Bangalore, India, as a special student at the United Theological College on Miller Road in Bensontown. I was humbled. I didn't want to keep eating in the international hostel of the school with all the wealthy Westerners. I wanted to go eat with my classmates, the everyday Indians. And so I ate in the regular student cafeteria. This moment was when the food was put down in front of me. This plate, and you'd think it might have been a grand, succulent, creamy Indian curry with lamb or chicken, a magnificent Rogan Josh. No. It was some okra, simple vegetables in a thin, watery curry sauce. The rice was overcooked. And to drink, I had water that was warm. There was an outbreak of typhoid, and they were supposed to be boiling it. The water was warm. And I was grateful. I looked down at this plate, and I was so deeply grateful for all the mercy and love that God was showing me in the lives of my students and teachers, professors, missionaries, the people that I met along the road or the train tracks. It was an act of mercy that happened in the margins of life, far away from here in the mainstream. That act of gratitude was God's mercy to me. You notice I use the words margins and mainstream. Why use those? Well, we have a wonderful American Baptist missionary now retired by the name of Dan Buttry. Dan spent a career in helping people to broker peace. He taught people in groups all over the world. His website today has many different workshops and activities for helping people to creatively communicate, understand each other, and create peace. He literally has brokered peace between warring factions around the world. One of them in the tribal hill country of northeastern India. Dan Buttry went and he called upon two generals that had been waging war at each other for years. Thousands and thousands of people had died. Nobody in the developed world wanted to give them any of their time to resolve this conflict. Why? Because they had absolutely no natural resources to offer. So they were forgotten, and the war destroyed towns and lives. He called, Dan Buttry, these two warring generals together, and they sat down outside at a simple cafe for a few hours. And using the principles from Dan's negotiation, principles that lay in the depths of our gospel, created mercy, a peace that lasted many, many years. So when Dan Buttry tells me that it's very wise to use these words, mercy and mainstream, when talking about the dynamics of power between people, I listen. He really suggests them because he noticed when he was helping people to understand each other, there were certain words or terms that certain people just couldn't hear, and it would create such trouble in their heart. It was a stumbling block, and it kept things from moving forward. Words like oppressor and oppressed. No one wants to admit that they're an oppressor. No one wants to admit that they're a racist or that they are a fragile white person. These words are very charged. And so he suggests using margins and mainstream to help people understand one another. Jesus talked about the dynamics between the the margins and the mainstream. Matthew 16, for those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. Or chapter 20, verse 16, so the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. That's very right. But this morning, we're hearing from the book of 2 Kings chapter 5, the great general Naaman. Now, as a Baptist, I like this because of the way that Naaman gets healed. Indeed, our own baptism tradition, the baptistry that we have in First Baptist Church, it comes from Judaism. There's the tradition that they have called the mikvah. It's a giant pool of water. There's actually one in the New Haven area at a synagogue. And people go to it for healing and cleansing, but when people convert to Judaism, sometime in the first year, they go and dip themselves in the mikvah. Very similar to what we do as Baptists. So I like Naaman. Naaman was a great commander. A commander was in charge of a massive body of military troops. A commander from Aram, Damascus, which is very similar to where Damascus is now. If you go to Beirut in Syria and you go inland about 50 miles, that's where Damascus is. He was commander of the army. It says the Lord blessed him with success, meaning he was mighty in valor, extremely brave, and successful in all of his ventures. But that was the mainstream, very mainstream. Success, power, fame. But he was brought to his knees. Naaman was brought into the margins because he had leprosy. And what usually happened to most lepers? They were shunned from the community. They were so incredibly feared. They were forced to live outside and to beg. They were forced to wear bells and shout their name. Shout, leper, leper, coming, leper coming. They were unclean. And they were shunned. They were feared. They were torn from their families and societies, completely pushed out to the edges of the wilderness, literally to the margins. So, one day they are raiding Israel. Somehow he was able to have this disease and stay in power. But it was a big, big threat. Raiding Israel. And they captured a girl who became the servant of Naaman's wife. We don't know their names. We don't know especially this slave girl's name, this girl who had been ripped from her parents. Maybe her family was dead. And she hears and sees what Naaman is going through with his leprosy. And she says, if you go to the prophet of Israel, then he will heal you. And Naaman will know there's a God in Israel. From a little girl. And they communicate this to Naaman. And so he goes, where? Not to the prophet. He goes to the king, because Naaman is all about power and prestige and might and wealth and royalty, majesty, valor. So he goes to the king, tells him his situation, and the king says, yes, and I will send a letter with you to the king of Israel. So Naaman goes, and he brings gifts. He's a man of power, so he brings power. What does he go with? 750 pounds of silver. In today's money, $300,000. 150 pounds of gold. $4 million. And 10 new outfits, literally fit for a king. He was gonna look good. And he has the letter. Letter from the king. I'm sending my servant Naaman, cure him of his leprosy, please. Oh, wait, there's more. Let's just think about this. There's more. He goes to the king and expects healing. And the king tears his clothes. Remember Jonah, and Jonah goes to Nineveh, and the king of Nineveh tears his clothes when he's grieved with how angry God is with them. The king of Israel tears his clothes, Because he says, who am I? Am I God? I can't heal this man. The king of Damascus is picking a battle with me. I could die. And the king is very upset. Well, who hears this? The prophet Elisha. Let's back up a minute. Who were the prophets? Prophets were those who spoke for God. They spoke about God's love. And not just love individually, which is kind of what we focus on a lot these days in our faith, individual relationship with God. But they were also concerned with love lived in community. What's love lived in community? Justice, care for the poor, the orphan, the widow, the sick, the foreigner, the refugee, and the lepers. And since the beginning of the reign of kings in Israel, since the beginning of Saul and David and Solomon, there was relationship with the prophets. The prophets stayed close to the kings, the place of power, to keep a check on it. Because when the people of Israel said, oh, we want kings, we want to have war and plundering and the nice things they bring back, we want to have a nice life too. And the prophets and God through the prophets said, okay, but you're not going to like it. Prophets spoke the truth of God's love to power. That's why Elijah could hear, was in proximity to hear the distress of the king. He tells the king, send him to me. Send him to me, and I will heal him. Naaman, who favored power, is suddenly directed to those who care for the powerless, from the mainstream to the margin. And so Naaman goes with his posse of horses and chariots and wealth. A chariot was an amazing thing in that day. It was the highest achievement of technology of the day. A warrior in a chariot drawn by many horses could kill many, many people. It was greatly feared and a symbol of strength and greatness. So he goes with all that, goes to the home of the prophet Elisha, who in the previous chapter has just shown mercy through women, girls, a slave girl. And now here comes Elisha on his mission. And he gets to Elisha's house, and does Elisha come out? No. A messenger, just a simple, ordinary servant messenger, comes out to greet Naaman, tells him, go to the Jordan River, wash yourselves 7 times, and you'll be clean. And Naaman throws a fit. He is incensed at this incredible disrespect that he has been shown. Doesn't he know who I am? He should come out himself. I was expecting Elisha, the great prophet of Israel, to come out, pray to God. Maybe he was thinking the heavens part, pray to God. And then he would lay his hands upon me and something magnificent would happen. You know, we're talking kind of Steven Spielberg kind of stuff. Amazing magic would happen and I would be healed. The Jordan River. The Jordan? Really? That muddy cesspool? The Jordan River? We've got rivers back home. The Farpar, back in Damascus. That's a great river. Why didn't he just have me wash there? The Jordan? Really? The Jordan? So what is the Jordan River? For the people of Israel, the Jordan River was a place of death and new life. In order for the Hebrews to come in and be the Israelites and claim the new Holy Land, they had to pass through the Jordan River. How about the great spiritual Jordan River's chilly and cold chills the body, but not the soul. Jordan River, where people encounter death, sinking below the waters like we do in baptism, a symbol of dying to death and being cleansed and raised to new life. And when they passed through, their new life began in the land of Israel. But what about the other body of water. And you're saying, what other body? Elisha only mentioned the Jordan. I'm talking about the other body of water. What does the body of water of Jordan have to do with another body? What body might that be? The Red Sea. The Jordan River became a symbol, their new symbol of the Red Sea. The Red Sea that God had parted through a pillar of fire and great wind to deliver, save, bring mercy from one side to the other. To whom? Egyptian, severely oppressed Hebrew slaves, victims of genocide. The Hebrews had killed all of their firstborn. They suffered great pain, and God showed mercy and delivered them from the margins. And in time, they came into the mainstream of God's love, to a land flowing in milk and honey. So when Naaman finally goes to the Jordan River, that's what he's connecting to. The journey of liberation, freedom, salvation of the most oppressed people. Foreigners pressed into oppression, slavery. People who were once owned and killed and brought to new life. And where is this mercy in the margins? Who does this mercy come to? The great Naaman. He dips himself in the water 7 times.